Have you ever imagined what happens when a defenseless lion cub faces the cruelest fate in nature? We grow up hearing that lions are kings, that their lives are all about strength and majesty. But the story I'm about to tell you today is very different. It's about a cub who's born with fate stacked against him, small and fragile, and who was rejected by his own family. But what he did after being abandoned and broken, that will shock you. This journey begins in the heart of a hot savanna, where the air vibrated with the buzz of flies and smelled of damp earth from the recent rain. Little Kovu was far from being like his siblings. He was smaller, thinner, and always the last one to eat, pushed aside by the others, who were stronger. Have you ever felt that way, as if you're always fighting for a place at the table? Kovu lived that every single day. He didn't have the strength of the other cubs, or the affection he so desperately sought. His survival was a constant struggle, a silent war that no one seemed to notice. But what seemed like the end for him was actually just the beginning of a journey that would show everyone the true strength of a spirit. What happens when the most fragile of all is forced to fight not for territory, but for a place in his own family? The answer lies right here, in the lonely gaze of little Kovu. And what destiny had in store for him next was even more cruel. Life for the little lion cub Kovu was a daily test. Since birth, he seemed to be the ugly duckling of the litter, while his siblings, stronger and heavier, competed for their mother's attention with vigorous purrs. Kovu was pushed to the side. The hot savanna air carried the smell of milk and fresh meat, but all he tasted was abandonment. Can you imagine what it's like to grow up knowing you don't have a guaranteed place in your family? Kovu was hungry, not because food was scarce, but because nature has a cruel hierarchy, even among cubs. Here's a fact that many people don't know. The mortality rate for lion cubs is extremely high. Many don't survive their first year of life, and the weakest are almost always the first to go. It's the harsh reality. For Kovu, every game with his siblings was a battle, every meal a war. He tried to fit in, running with them, trying to imitate their leaps and make-believe hunts. But the sound of his small roars was always muffled by the stronger ones. He felt the pain of exclusion as a weight on his chest. And that's where we can relate, isn't it? Who has never felt like the ugly duckling in a group, desperately trying to prove their worth? Kovu teaches us a powerful lesson: overcoming. Adversity starts from within. It's about finding your own strength, even when no one else sees it. He didn't have his family's approval, but he had a will to live that was stronger than anything. If you love stories that make you feel the emotion of the wild, go ahead and leave that like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any adventure. Life, however, doesn't give a break to those who fight. That day, a decision by the pride would forever change little Kovu's destiny. The pride decided to move, and the sky, which had been blue, began to darken. A storm was forming on the horizon. The night arrived with a fury the savanna rarely sees. The wind howled, bringing the strong smell of rain and wet earth. Fat drops began to fall, and with every flash of lightning, the sky opened up in a terrifying blaze. The pride moved quickly, seeking shelter. Kovu, already weak and slow, struggled to keep up. He slipped on a wet rock, and the pain was a jolt that shot up his spine, followed by silence. His little hind legs, once agile, no longer moved. And the most terrible sound of all was that of his heart breaking, seeing his family disappear into the darkness of the storm. The lesson here is harsh, but real. Nature has no room for weakness. During a migration, the group always prioritizes the survival of the majority. Cubs who can't keep up are, tragically, left behind. It's the law of life. Kovu, in that moment, felt what true abandonment is like. You know that feeling of being left behind just when you need help the most? He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The sound of the wind was his only companion, and the smell of fear was the only familiar scent. Pause and look at the sky. Who has never looked up at the stars and felt they were alone in the universe? For Kovu, that's exactly what it was. But the same rain that washed the savannah also washed away the lion's tracks, making the task of finding them almost impossible. The cold of the night, the pain in his spine, and the silent cry of the little cub were witnessed only by the sky. He was broken, but his spirit, for some reason that couldn't be explained, still had a flame. The night gave way to day, and the sun returned to shine on the savannah. But for Kovu, the light brought only a new and terrifying reality. His body, once an instrument for running and playing, was now a dead weight. What would he do now, alone and unable to walk? Instead of giving up, something lit up in Kovu's eyes. A spark of pure resilience. In an act of sheer will, he began to drag himself. The sound of his small body scraping against the hot sand was the only soundtrack, a sound that spoke louder than any roar. His front paws, once used for playing, became his only motors, and he used them with a strength no one could have imagined. He felt his skin scraping against the ground, the bitter taste of dust in his mouth, but the smell of his family, carried by the wind, was his only compass dot. It's amazing the ability of animals to adapt. We underestimate their strength, don't we? There's a surprising fact about nature. Many animals that suffer severe injuries develop a compensatory muscle strength in other parts of their bodies, becoming, in a way, stronger. Kovu couldn't walk, but he became a little warrior. He used his weakness to become something he never would have been. This is a lesson for us. Our greatest limitations can become our greatest strength if we know where to look. For Kovu, the path was an emotional roller coaster. With every step forward, he felt the joy of overcoming, but with every moving shadow, he felt the fear of a predator. He faced thirst and the blazing sun, his weak body screaming for water, but his mind was focused on one single goal: to find his family again. Have you ever felt that the only option was to keep going, even when your body and mind were at their limit? Kovu was living that dot after days of a solitary struggle. The smell of his family began to get stronger. A flame of hope was lit in his chest, but the savannah hides dangers. He was close, but the journey brought a new obstacle. What was that different smell that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up? That smell, which made the hairs on Kovu's neck stand up, was something familiar. It was the smell of his family, mixed with a faint trace of danger, the scent of a recent hunt. The sight of his siblings running and playing in the sun filled the little cub's heart with immense joy. He dragged himself as fast as he could, longing for the warmth and protection he had so missed. But upon getting close, something terrible happened. The other cubs, seeing his injured leg, growled and backed away as if he were a threat. The harsh reality of nature presented itself, and the most painful moment of all, his own mother. She approached, and Kovu's heart pounded with the hope of a mother's embrace. But instead, she sniffed him, felt his weakness, and with her head down, simply turned away. She refused to suckle him. Can you understand the depth of that rejection? The law of nature is cruel. In times of scarcity, the mother needs to guarantee the survival of the strongest cubs, so the bloodline continues. That was an act of love for everyone, except for him. Who has never felt like they weren't good enough for those who should love them unconditionally? The feeling of his mother's cold muzzle turning away from him was more painful than any scratch. Kovu lay there, a small broken body in the middle of a family that now saw him as a burden. He had no home. The air filled with a heavy silence, which screamed louder than any roar. But even with a broken heart, he stayed close, observing. He had overcome the world outside. Now he needed to overcome the rejection that came from within. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Kovu's journey seemed to have ended, but he was still not safe. What he didn't know was that the greatest test of his intelligence was about to begin. The morning sun brought with it the most frightening sound of the savannah, the cackling of hyenas. Kovu, who was lying in the grass, lifted his head. There was no time to cry. The fear which had once paralyzed him was now his engine. He knew he couldn't run. His body wouldn't allow it. It was an all-or-nothing moment. The little cub needed a plan. Resilience isn't just about enduring pain. It's about being smarter than the pain. Look at how crazy this is. A hyena's bite is one of the strongest in the entire animal kingdom, capable of crushing bones with ease. Fighting would be suicide. Kovu then did what only intelligence and overcoming can do. He used his small stature to his advantage. He spotted a narrow crack between two large rocks, a space too small for the hyenas. With surprising speed, he dragged himself to it and squeezed into the hole, escaping by a hair's breadth. The sound of the hyena's frustrated cackling, which echoed through the rocks, was music to his ears. It's amazing how, in moments of despair, we discover a strength we didn't even know we had. Who has never had to use their brain to solve a problem that brute force couldn't? Kovu showed us that the best weapon isn't always muscles. It's our ability to think outside the box, to find a solution that no one else can see. He had escaped danger, but the challenge wasn't over yet. He was safe for now. But what he didn't know was that his journey back to his family would have to pass through the deadliest obstacle of all, a river with a hidden danger. He dragged himself to the riverbank, smelling the scent of fresh water, and once again, the scent of his family. It was the last barrier, but also the most dangerous. The water was murky, dark, and Kovu's mind screamed with the possibility of what might be hidden there. He hesitated. His instinct told him not to go, but the desire to be with his family was stronger than any fear. He began to drag himself into the water, feeling the temperature of the cold mud on his body. The attack was a blur of scales, teeth, and force. A giant crocodile, fast as lightning, emerged from the water, snapping at Kovu's small body. His scream of terror was silenced by the sound of the jaws, and for an instant, the world stopped. It seemed like the end of the line. But then, a force he thought he had lost intervened. With a roar of fury that made the entire jungle tremble, his mother jumped into the water. She attacked the crocodile with a wild rage, the rage of one who protects her own dot. It's incredible the strength of a mother's instinct. A little-known fact: motherhood in lionesses is not just instinct, but a deep bond that, in danger, can make them fight to the death for a cub, even if they had rejected it before. The mother's intervention wasn't for a strong lion, but for her cub, her own flesh and blood. The lesson here is powerful. A mother's love can overcome any barrier, any harshness of nature. It shows us that overcoming is also an act of love. Crocodile, dazed and wounded, let go of Kovu and retreated. The lioness approached her son. The emotional reunion was a silence that spoke louder than 1,000 words. She sniffed him, and with a tenderness he had never felt, she nestled him close and finally suckled him. Little Kovu, broken and abandoned, was finally home. But with his body still fragile, he would need to prove his worth once more. While the drama of life and death unfolded on the savannah, a pair of human eyes was watching everything from afar. It was the biologist David Weber. He was there to study nature, not to change it, but what he saw tore him apart inside. With his camera in hand and binoculars to his eyes, he was a silent witness to little Kovu's suffering. You know when you have the power to help, but you know you shouldn't. David's heart was in an internal struggle. an ethical dilemma that many conservationists face. He saw Kovu drag himself, fight against hunger, run from the hyenas, and for an instant, he thought about intervening. But his mission was clear. Human intervention in wildlife has unpredictable consequences. A curiosity that few people know. By saving a weak animal, you could be weakening the genetics of the species, or removing a vital food source for another predator. Like the hyenas, the lesson here is that not every act of love is a help. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give someone is the chance for them to prove their own strength. The sound of the wind beating against his clothes was the only sound, besides his heart beating hard. He felt the pang of sadness. But deep down, he knew that Kovu's overcoming wouldn't be real if he didn't achieve it on his own. Resilience is a virtue learned through pain. It's like when we have to watch a friend go through a difficult problem, knowing they need that moment to grow. David's decision was a bet on Kovu's resilience, and the little lion would not disappoint. His next battle would not be against a predator, but to earn his place in his own family. The decision of David was a bet on Kovu's resilience, and the little lion would not disappoint. His next battle would not be against a predator, but to earn his place in his own family. Back with the pride, with his mother now by his side, Kovu used his intelligence and the strength he developed in his front paws to help with small hunts. He was the observer, the strategist, and he would alert the group to dangers with a little roar that no one else had. That broken cub, whom nature had rejected, became a pillar of strength, a living example that overcoming is not about the absence of weakness, but about the presence of a purpose. Kovu's story is proof that survival does not depend only on physical strength. Hope is our greatest weapon. The little lion did not heal his injury, but he healed his soul. And in doing so, he taught us all a lesson. Who has never felt that a part of them was broken, but discovered that it was exactly that break that made them stronger? Acceptance from his family came not because he became strong, but because he showed the power of resilience in the face of adversity. The shine in his eyes, which was once fear, was now a deep peace. That cub who was a burden was now a source of pride. His story shows us that determination and courage are the true definers of our destiny. Kovu did not become a king for his strength, but rather for his spirit. And the most beautiful part is that he found a new purpose in life, proving that resilience isn't just about surviving, but about thriving. If this story warmed your heart, the next video suggested by YouTube will move you even more. Don't miss it. And if you've had an animal that changed your life, tell us about it in the comments. Your story could be the next to inspire thousands of people.